Good morning. A number of years ago, my wife and I watched a Hallmark movie, and I was moved by a line in that movie. The young couple who were supposedly in love and planning for marriage, engaged, were going to a special meeting where the young man who was in line for a promotion was to give a speech to all the executives and people in the company. And as they were on the way to that special meeting, it began to pour and rain. And he said to her, he said, "I try to be a perfect gentleman to you and I love you dearly, but this meeting means the world to me and it could have to do with my promotion. Is there any way that you could drop me off at the front door and you go park the car, because I am going to be a drowned rat and I am first up to bat to give my speech. And I don't want that to happen. Is there any way you would consider that?" And she looked at the floor for a minute, kind of irritated, and said, "No, I'm not going to ruin my hair and get." And he said at that moment, a realization came to him that if she wouldn't walk in the rain for him at a very important moment in his life, why is he marrying this woman? If she won't walk in the rain for me. So this morning I prepared a video, and it's pouring down rain, and I usually walk and do a video in the woods, and I felt like the Lord said to me, "Will you do the video in the rain?" So it has let up, but I don't know, I might be a drowned rat before this is over. But we're going to do the video in the rain because I have a thought for you, strong, that God has put on me this morning. I feel like I need to give it while I have it. Acts 13, 22b is a powerful verse of Scripture. Now, I have a long message, a long-winded 50-minute message probably on the web, and I think it's September of 2020. You can find it. It's not a video. It's totally audio. But I have on this, and God stirred me about that this week. And that passage in Acts 13, 22b, which is also found in 1 Samuel 13, just really, really stirs me. And I want to quote it for you. God says, and actually in Acts, the writer there is quoting what's in 1 Samuel 13. But he said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do whatever I tell him to do. A better translation of that is, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. And I want you to hear that, because I'm going to come back to that later. He will do everything I want him to do. And that's actually in the NIV and in the NLT, and I believe that's the most accurate translation. That verse has always stirred my heart. I have found David. Isn't it amazing that the God of the universe would be looking for something? God wants relationship. God wants relationship. Isn't it amazing that the God of the universe would be looking for something? I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything that I want him to do. If there's anything I've been thankful for in my life, and thankful for many things, but if there's anything I've been thankful for, it's something that was instilled in me years ago, and I look for it in people to see if they're serious about God, and that is a hunger. If you were to ask me of all things spiritually, what probably has been most important to me, I would say it's the hunger that was put within me as a young man. I had some incredible mentors. Reverend Bishop, awesome mentor, had buried 2 of his sons in British Honduras as a missionary. Made the casket himself. He said he even used parts of a Kentucky Fried Chicken box to form a small casket. Can you imagine doing that and burying your sons? His wife then contracted a disease and had to come home, and they brought her home, and she went into a coma and was in the hospital in Fort Wayne, Indiana for 6 years while he raised their daughters, and had to come home from the mission field. How confusing all of that could be. But when I met Reverend Bishop, who had been a good friend of my father, I was so intrigued by him as a bitter young man, and had turned away from God and had forsaken the God of my childhood and the calling I had as a child, and I've talked about that in other messages. But I was so stirred as I watched him. I would kneel with him at the altar, for he invited me to come and have my devotional time with him in the morning when I accepted and came back to the Lord. What a privilege that was. And on Thursday mornings, we often would be there for a long time at the altar, and tears would run down his face. And he would talk about the goodness of God and how God had just blessed him through life and been such a friend to him and walked with him through every peril and circumstance. And I'm sitting there on the floor looking at it. I don't know what this guy's got, but I want it. I don't know what this guy's got, but I want it. He's buried 2 of his sons in British Honduras, had to abandon his missionary venture and dream that he had felt called to do by God, or he wouldn't have gone. And then he comes home, and his wife's in a coma. The nurses at Lutheran Hospital said that he would come in every day and bring a hymnal and sing to her. And he told me in 6 years, one time she responded just a little bit. He thought that she might have heard him. The girls, the one daughter, and I talked to the girls, but the one daughter especially told me that she would hear him sobbing in the night and go into the room, and he would be holding his wife's picture and crying. But that man, watching him and how God, the Spirit of God, had enabled him, because he didn't get bitter, because he didn't get angry, because he didn't get derailed. Because that's the attempt of the devil, to do that, to derail you, to get you angry. It takes you out. He stayed sweet and stayed surrendered to God. The incredible presence of God was all over that man, and I wanted that, and a hunger was born in me. I'm 66 years old. It's still there. A hunger was born in me. And I could easily have an ADD moment and get off track here, but are you making anybody hungry for the bread of life? Are you making anybody thirsty for the living water? Is your life the type of life? And we make our mistakes. We're human. We're made out of dust, and God forgives us, and we understand that totally and completely. But I want to live a life that people say, you know, he's got something. I want to see a hunger in people, and that's so missing today, and it concerns me so very, very, very greatly. What a wonderful mentor. My father, tremendous mentor in so many ways, and I believe God gave me, and I humbly say, but I believe God gave me his preaching gift, and Daddy acknowledged that to me. And my brother Jimmy, as he modeled forgiveness as a little boy when I had stolen from him and was caught and scared to death, he sat on the back steps and read the 10 Commandments and talked about thou shalt not steal, and how that sin was sin and the law was given for a reason, and this was wrong. And oh, I was just so intent in listening to him. And then he put his arm around me and hugged me and squeezed me and said to me very gently, as an older brother and father figure, he said to me, I forgive you, Tommy, completely. And then he gave me what I had stolen as a gift. Wow. I've had some models. What a wonderful privilege to have that. And David Wilkerson from afar, I felt mentored me very, very carefully. So I'm grateful for the hunger that God put within me. I want to tell you today that God is looking for something. Are you listening? God is looking for something. I have found David, the man after God's own heart. And he will do everything that I tell him to do. Oh my. I hunger and long for that to be said about me. In this time of chaos and mixed voices, and in this time when things are melting down and we're nearing the coming of Christ in the 7-year tribulation period, and things don't always look fair, and I believe, as I've said in previous messages, we're going to move into a time when there's going to be unfair circumstances. I want God to say, I have found Tom. He's a man after my own heart. He wants my heart. That doesn't mean he's perfect. That doesn't mean he never makes a mistake. He's a man after my heart. He wants my heart. He wants to be real. He wants to be the real deal. And he will do everything. Remember that word. He will do everything that I tell him to do. In John chapter 4, the woman at the well. Amazing. Jesus sat on the well and visited with this woman, and this is a woman who had been through multiple relationships. In fact, he said to her, "Go call your husband." It's interesting that he brought her to truth. He brought her to truth. You know, Jesus wants to bring us to truth. He wants to bring us to the straight and narrow, and he lovingly does that. Jesus never chewed out a sinner. Now, he'd chew out the Pharisees and the synagogue leaders, but he never chewed out a sinner. And it's awesome, the gentle spirit he had with that woman, but yet he didn't avoid truth. And my friends, we got to remember that in this day and age with slipping morals and deteriorating conditions in our country and all that's happened. Jesus didn't avoid truth. He first asked for a drink, started a conversation. And he offered her then living water, and she was confused about all that. John chapter 4, it's a neat story. And she said, "I'd like to have this water that you're talking about," but she didn't grasp what he was really talking about. That he was talking about the spiritual thirst and the water, the living water that he could give. And she wanted water so she wouldn't ever have to come back and draw water again from Jacob's well. And he looked straight at her and said, "Go call your husband." And she said, "Well, I have a husband." He said, "No, you don't have a husband. You've had 5 and you're with somebody that isn't your husband." And isn't it interesting that in that encounter which he ordered, isn't it interesting how he called her to truth, because he didn't want her to hurt anymore. It wasn't about legalism or laws. It was about he didn't want her to hurt anymore. He didn't want her to suffer with painful, broken relationships. He wanted to bring her to a inner satisfaction. And then she could seek an appropriate person in her life, and God would have his blessing on it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? But as we move on in that story, and I needed to emphasize that point, but as we move on in that story, there's something there I want you to see. She continued to talk to him, and they talked about the different places to worship, and he was trying to bring her around. And then he said, the true worshipers, because she brought up, where do we worship, or where do we go to church? You know, what? He said, the true worshipers worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Let me repeat that. The true worshipers worship the Father in spirit and truth. The Father seeketh such to worship him, as the King James word. The Father seeketh such. He's looking for something, folks. He's looking for something. He's seeking out those who truly worship him. He's worth, the root word of worship is worth. He's worth more to them than anything else. They seek first, Matthew 6:33, the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then let him add the other things they need instead of chasing all those things all their life. God is looking for something. We see Esther in the Old Testament. I love the story of Esther. And Esther went in and begged for the Jewish people to live, and it's quite a story. I would encourage you to read the book of Esther. I loved that as a child. My mom used to tell me that story. I loved that story. But it's interesting how that Esther, a woman, a strong woman of faith, before she went in to beseech the king, and could lose her life in doing it, because you weren't just to go into the king and talk. You could be killed for entering in without permission. But as she prepared through the encouragement of her uncle, Mordecai, and God was ordering it to save the Jewish people, and she was a key. In fact, Mordecai said, maybe for this reason you were born. And Esther asked her maidens to fast and pray, and she fasted and prayed. She said a powerful thing. She said, we will fast and pray, and then I will go in. If I perish, I perish. Oh my. If I perish, I perish. But I'm going to do the right thing. Are you listening? I'm going to do the right thing. Are you listening? I'm going to do the right thing. If I perish, I perish. I'm going to fast and pray. I'm going to go in prayed up. I'm going to do my homework. But then I'm going to do the right thing. God is looking for people like that. Listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. Joel, in the book of Joel, and then again repeated in Acts, I often quote this. It says, in the last days I will pour out my Spirit on your sons and daughters. Yes, I will pour out my Spirit on your sons and daughters. We're entering a new era. We're entering a time of the unleashing of spirits. I preached on that in the Corona lockdown last spring. I encourage you to hear those messages. We're entering a time when things are changing. But God is looking for a remnant. He's looking for ones that he can choose because they choose. Not because they're better than somebody else, not because of their family name. Look at the woman at the well. Who would have ever suspected that's who he would have picked? But he told her, the Father's seeking such. He's looking for Esther's. I have found David, the man after my own heart. He will do everything I tell him to do. What a powerful, powerful thing. Will you be a called out one? Oh, I have written down in my notes that God uses the unlikely candidates. Do you know that in that story in John chapter 4, that he revealed himself as the Messiah? Do you know how bad the Jewish people wanted him to say who he was? And he sidestepped them every time. It's interesting who he revealed himself to. She said to him in this conversation, well, when the Messiah comes, he will tell us all things. She had been talking with him about living water and kind of realizing he was deeply spiritual, and even said, well, I think you're probably a prophet. And she said, when the Messiah comes, he'll reveal all things. And Jesus said, I that speaking of thee am he. Do you know how many people wanted to hear those words? I'm telling you, listen. I'm telling you, God picks unlikely candidates. He picks unlikely candidates. He picks sometimes the unpredictable. But you know, the leading of the Spirit, I say it reverently, but the leading of the Spirit is unpredictable. Later I'm going to have a message on John 3:8, hopefully in the mountains of Colorado. But I'm going to have a message on John 3:8, my favorite verse. One of my favorite verses, and maybe my favorite. The wind blows where it lists, and you hear the sound thereof. You know not whence it cometh or whither it goeth, so everyone is that is born of the Spirit of God. I love that verse. But you know, the wind, it's kind of unpredictable, and you don't know when it'll stir up suddenly, and it'll even be a whirlwind, or it'll be a soft breeze. And you know, God picks the unpredictable that are willing to be led of him. I have found David. He will do everything I tell him to do. All right. I got to talk about that for a minute, and then we'll wind this up. Unfortunately, it didn't storm terrible on me. I have found David, the man after my own heart. He will do everything. It doesn't say anything. And notice the NIV and the NLT, which are the most accurate translations of that particular verse. He will do everything. Notice it doesn't say he will do anything. This isn't a play on words. God gave me this a while ago, and this is for somebody that's listening. There's a difference between anything and everything. Are you listening? There is a difference between anything and everything. It says he will do everything I want him to do. Oh, I had a guy, well-meaning guy with lots of zeal and gusto come up to me, and he said, Pastor, if somebody came into this church and they thought they'd shoot up the place like happened in some of the other states, he said, I'd take a bullet for you, and I meant it. That meant a lot to me. Made me cry. But sometimes people will do anything. Well, I'll do anything. You give me, I'll jump off a cliff for the Lord. I'll take off and go to Africa. I'll do the bizarre. I'll do the adventurous. I'll do the... But will you do everything? There's a difference between anything and everything. Sometimes he gives you a job you don't want to do. Sometimes you got to have a confrontation that just shoots your nerves to pieces, and you lay awake 4 nights in a row and everybody's against you. Sometimes you have to stand up for things in your family, and you take heat for it, and you have distance in relationship, and you're not loved to the level others are because you've taken a stand and you stood for truth, and you said, go call your husband, and you drew a line in the sand. There's a difference between anything and everything. Are you listening? There's a difference between anything and everything. And I got all kind of people, and I appreciate them. And some of them are just young and zealous and inexperienced, and I get that. I get that. And I appreciate it. But they'll say, oh, man, I'd do anything for the Lord. Why I'd do anything for the Lord? All he's got to do is tell me, and I'll jump off a cliff. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll do that. Maybe you'll do anything, but will you do everything? David, the son of Jesse, it's interesting he gave him credit to his father. That's a wonderful thing to do. Honored my father early in this video as a mentor. The man after my own heart, he will do everything. Everything I want him to do. Other translations, instead of saying want to do, says my will. Will you do the will of God even when it's painful? Will you do the will of God even when it goes against the grain? Will you do the will of God? We're going to face a time, we're going to be tested on that. This is going to separate the men and the boys. The anything and the everything is the separation of men and the boys. All kind of people, boy, I'll do it. You can count on me. I'll do it. I'll take a bullet for you. But will you do everything? Those details in your life that God speaks, those sins he wants you to forsake, you won't do it. You won't do it. So you don't have the presence. I'm telling you, he's calling out a remnant. Got to close. He's calling out a remnant. He's calling out. In my last days, he says, in the last days, I'll pour my spirit out on your sons and daughters. He's calling us. He's calling us. Answer the call, I plead with you.
Obviously, that message was given quite some time ago, but the last week I've had that message on my mind. And this morning, when I woke up, the passage I had on my mind will be familiar to some of you. It's Isaiah 55, 6 through 9, and I'm not sure what all I'm going to tie on here. But I know that God spoke this passage to me for CMO this morning. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. In the book, The Day I Was Blessed with Leukemia, I have a chapter called Day of Visitation. That time when God, we don't know all this, his ways are higher than ours. But there'll be times when God just moves in. Sometimes it's in the midst of tragedy, sometimes it's in the midst of loss, sometimes it's in a time of despair, but not necessarily. As the wind of the Spirit, I'm more and more praying, Lord, make me sensitive to the gentle breezes of the Spirit. Day of visitation, time when he visits you. Don't let that go by. Last week I shared in the message about my grandfather. I shared in the message about how grieve not the Spirit of God. But when God's calling, when he's urging, when he's wooing you, when he's calling you, come to him. Come to him. I don't know why I feel all the urgency I do this morning, but I do. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Isaiah 55, 6 through 9. Call on him while he's near. We're nearing a dark time. I believe that with all my heart. I don't believe everybody's seeing this. But I've got to be true to what I feel God tells me in my walks by the river and my walks on the prayer trail. Prayer is becoming more important than it's ever been before. It's always held a high place. And God will just give me impressions that I know are him, and then I'll say, Lord, I want to be a careful messenger. Confirm that, and then he'll confirm it to me. But we're nearing a dark time. No man knows the day or the hour of the return of Christ. But we do recognize the season, and we are nearing a dark hour. In the tribulation hour, the cry is, woe unto you, for the devil has come down unto you. Anybody, does it look like that to you? I don't believe we're in the tribulation yet, but I'm saying to you, this whole thing of the enemy and the unleashing of spirits, I'm on to something. God gave me that power for you during the corona lockdown, that there's a new thing happening. Like, Lord, what is wrong? What is wrong? Something is wrong. What is wrong? It feels different. The culture feels different. Things are wrong. And God spoke to me that there's in this hour of the return of the Lord, there is this nearing this time. And of course, the devil is going to actually come down. Woe on you if the devil come down to you. And I believe I believe theologically it's correct that it's at the middle of the tribulation hour when he enters the Antichrist and actually imitates Jesus, where God in a man was Jesus. It'll be the devil in a man. And he's always copied God. But woe unto you, for he's come down. He's come down unto you. And I believe now, as the spirit of Antichrist, it warns. The spirit of Antichrist, I am God. My generation rebelled against God. The new generation, it's I am God. I'll decide what gender I am. I will decide what this. I have my own thinking. I have my own belief system. On and on and on it goes. Come unto me. Seek ye the Lord. Answer the call while he may be found. Call on him while he's near. When he visits, don't ignore it. Don't turn a deaf ear. When he speaks to you, it troubles me in the parable of the 5 wise and 5 foolish virgins. It says they all fell asleep. I was talking about this with one of the assistant pastors this morning. I see this happening. It scares me. That always bothered me. They all fell asleep. That jumped out at me from the Lord. They all fell asleep, it says. Now we know that 5 were ready and 5 weren't. But it's interesting that they all fell asleep. There's a numbness going on in the Church of Jesus Christ, and people aren't sensitive to it. There's a numbness happening. And I'm like, Lord, what is the matter? Assembling isn't a priority anymore. It's if I have time, I'll work God into my schedule. But it's not a priority. This isn't about legalism. It's about when there's a day of visitation, you respond to that. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he's near. Let the wicked change their ways and banish the very thought of doing wrong, and let them turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on them. Yes, turn to God, and he will forgive generously. I like the King James in that particular passage. I'm reading the NLT. He will abundantly pardon. He's anxious to forgive. Isn't that awesome? That it says, my thoughts are nothing like your thoughts, says the Lord, and my ways are far beyond anything you can imagine. Just as the heavens are high above the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. We don't understand everything. We talked about that a while ago. And in the love chapter, it says, now we see through a dark. But his ways are higher than ours. But I know this. Seek the Lord while he may be found. And I believe we're nearing a dark time. And I believe I don't usually set goals for the next year until December, but if you've been with us and be 40 years of ministry next and some have been with us almost the whole journey. But at the end of the year, I'm always putting out goals for myself and asking you to make goals for yourself for the next year. And I know it's early to do that. It's just October. But I feel like 2023, seek the Lord. 2023, seek the Lord. We're nearing a dark time. 2023, seek the Lord. Trim off the nonsense. Weed the garden. Get the thorn patches out. And seek the Lord. And I don't know exactly what that looks like for you, and I don't believe I'm supposed to spell all that out. But seek the Lord in 2023. When someone says, what is your goal for next year? Say, I'm seeking the Lord this year. Seek the Lord while he may be found. No man can come to God unless the Spirit draws him. You got to have the Holy Spirit and the drawing of the Holy Spirit, but you got to seek him while he may be found. Because we're nearing a dark time. In the opening of the 5th seal, how long, O Lord? Those were precious saints. I mean, they were dying for their faith, but what were they saying? Are you listening? How long? In other words, hey, whoa, this is out of control. This is out of control. This was on my heart, on my lips, when my feet hit the floor this morning. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he's near. Despite conditions, despite the dark hour approaching. Some of the most incredible saints of God, I have found David. I have found David. The Father seeketh such to worship him. The true worshipers worship in spirit and truth, he said to the woman at the well. Esther said, if I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish. I'm going in. I am going in. If I perish, I perish. I'm going in. Sold out. Sold out. Trim it off. Trim it off. Don't fuss about nonsense. Get back to basics. Trim it off. Trim it off. Weed the garden. Seek the Lord while he may be found. And I believe we're in a time period where we're all going to sleep. When you sleep, you're alive, but you're just disconnected. Your emotions aren't in gear. You're disconnected. And I don't know what all that means, but I feel that we need to, in 2023, and we'll be there before we know it, What are we, 10, 12 weeks away? Seek the Lord while he may be found. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know the hour that he's coming back. I know I'm excited about my own life next year. Year of Jubilee, 50 years as a Christian. Next year I'll have 50 years as a Christian and 40 years in the ministry full time. They left the wilderness and went into Canaan at the 40-year mark. 50 years, year of Jubilee. I don't know what all that means, and I don't know what it means for you, but I know this is echoing in my soul, deeper than my mind, deeper than my emotions. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. We're in a window here, day of visitation, a time where even though many are going to sleep, I believe God's calling out a remnant. He's calling out those who are serious. He's calling out those who really, really want the heart of David. And I believe many of you have that within you. I see the hunger in you. I'm actually encouraged with that. And attendance isn't anything like it used to be. And people's desire to assemble has just changed. It's just changed. I don't fully understand it. It's just changed. But I do know that there's a fair percentage of people that I encounter regularly that I believe tears come to their eyes for a reason when we say, I have found David, because they want David. They want Esther. That's who they want. That's what they want to be. And seek the Lord while he may be found. While he may be found, there's an urgency there. Early in the week, Reed Warner sent me a passage. Luke chapter 12, 35 through 40. Luke chapter 12, 35. Be dressed for service and keep your lamps burning, as though you were waiting for your master to return from the wedding feast. Then you'll be ready to open the door and let him in the moment he arrives. Do you hear that? King James Version says, open immediately. Isn't it terrible when company shows up and the house is a mess? Oh, mercy. My sister used to say she put all the dirty dishes in the oven. Close the gym on there, shut the door. There's something to this. They opened immediately, it says. I like the King James Version in that particular passage. It says, then you'll be ready to open the door and let him in the moment he arrives and knocks. Oh, is he knocking? Do you feel a drawing when we're talking about Esther, when we're talking about David, and how God's seeking for that? He's calling out a remnant. I know I've said that on a broken record, but it will not leave me. God, we're in a period of time where God's calling out a remnant. He's calling out a remnant who's serious. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he's near. Don't miss your day of visitation. Don't miss your... I don't know what the future holds, but I know we're entering a dark time. And it isn't that God's mercy has changed, for it says here, he will abundantly pardon. It isn't, I think that pastor's implying that after 2023, you can't be saved. No, nothing like that. He will abundantly pardon. What I'm saying is that the atmosphere is going to get thicker and tougher, and it's going to be harder to hear the voice, and you seek the Lord while he may be found. Are you with me? My grandfather, was it that God didn't love him? Oh, no, he died for him. But I described it last week as he wanted to be spoken to by God and drawn so badly by the spirit of conviction that my grandfather, that was so moved, he actually got on his hands and knees and crawled on all fours to the altar, asking God to draw him again because he had sinned and been so mean and cruel to Grandma and Grandma's walk with the Lord that he said he felt numb. Well, God didn't leave the picture. He had numbed himself. But boy, when you have that sensitive feeling of knowing the Holy Spirit, you sit in a church service and you hear the songs and you feel that drawing, don't miss your day of visitation. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. I don't know what the future holds, but I know we're entering a dark time. You have to see that. And I believe you do. But I say that to the general public. They have to see that. Who would believe? Who would believe that sin would take over in so many ways because of the yielding to the enemy? We can be stronger than ever before, and he is looking for David's. The servants who are ready and waiting for his return will be rewarded. I tell you the truth, he himself will sit with them, put on an apron and serve them as they sit down and eat. Boy, won't that be something. Oh, man. I'm going to ask to sit next to Roger. I don't know if I'll get that or not, but I'd like to sit next to Roger. He may come in the middle of the night or just before dawn. Whenever he comes, he will reward those servants who are ready. Understand this. If the homeowner knew exactly when the burglar was coming, he would not have permitted his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. We don't know the day or the hour, but we do know that he told us, he said, he even scolded them and said, you can read the signs in the sky, why can't you see what's going on? We can read the weather, so why can't we see what's going on? We're nearing a dark time, and that passage is just heavy on me. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Don't turn a deaf ear. Don't callous over. Don't push him away. Don't chase wrong priorities. Trim it down. Weed the garden. I don't know what that means for you. If you come and ask me, I'll bow out on that. I don't know what that means for you. Some things are struggles for some that aren't for others. I don't know what that means for you. But I know that the call of God is to seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. And to change our ways and banish the very thought of doing wrong. Demand righteousness of yourself. Demand righteousness of yourself. We don't get in by good works. It's through the blood of Christ. But man, the Church of Jesus Christ is compromising in a level. This is off the charts. This is off the charts. The level of compromise, it's off the charts. Guard your heart, for out of it come all the issues of life. Guard your heart. I say it, one that walks and say, Lord, protect my heart. I'm so fragile, so fragile. Protect my heart. But God will be faithful, for they that endure to the end will be saved. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he's near. All right. That's what I believe I was supposed to say. So, let's stand together for prayer.